What's going on, Tamers? It's me, East, and man, I'm depressed. I got that post-manga depression. You know when you read like a really good series and then it just comes to an end and you just feel empty? Ugh. I just finished up Fire Force, and if you haven't read it, I cannot recommend it highly enough. But yeah, now that it's over, I don't know what to do with my time. So if you have any recommendations for some really good manga for me to read, please let me know in the comments below. Now, also, a couple of ground rules: only shonen, please. Miss me with the romance garbage. But in brighter news, we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. We finally have the ban list updated and in effect here in Japan, and I think also in the West. And we got our first week of events to talk about. Keep in mind the ban list did come right at the end of the first cycle of the Asian Digimon qualifiers for the World Championships later next year. And we're in this really weird space where this week specifically is like the 1 week gap between the first cycle and the second cycle, where we start to have more qualifiers for store regionals. To be more exact, those store regionals will start September 7th, which is like the weekend after we're looking at this week's results. And with players prepping for this new competitive season, on top of the new ban lists updated, we have this completely brand new landscape, and it can go any way it feels like. And so with that, let's take a look at some event results, a couple of key takeaways, and a close look at some of the decks that topped over the course of the past week. Diving into last week's results, you'll probably notice event turnout's pretty low, not a lot of events actually happening, and my guess is because, like I mentioned before, we have the store qualifiers coming up in this week, and so people are probably playing with their tightly knit friend groups or play groups to really practice without giving out too much information. Sifting through the top spots though, the results that we do have see Purple Hybrid doing really well, where in the past, and I think I've talked about it before on this channel, level 4s and level 5s seem really set for this deck, but the level 6s and level 3s have always been a point of contention. And at this point in time, it seems like they're focusing on an aggressive / mill focused version of Purple Hybrid, utilizing the powers of things like the Mervamon as well as the Belgramon to mill tons of cards at the same time, or going for big offensive burst turns using the Mervamon if possible. Even looking at the results from the community events this past weekend, a lot of folks have been trying this build out, and you should definitely keep your eyes on it. As lots of people looked at the cards Bandai decided to restrict, I think a lot of you had in the back of your mind, blue seems really strong as a result of these choices, and that is absolutely true when we take a look at the rookie level. Like 1, 2, 3, you've got all three offenders that people were looking at: Ancient Garurumon, Imperial Dramon, and Magnamon Armor, the blue variant. Rounding out the rest of that rookie level, you got things like Red Hybrid, 7 Great Demon Lords. When you take a look at the Shoto Kazama Tamer, it makes perfect sense why that deck is very strong right now. Things like, surprisingly, Lucamon. This deck put up almost no results before the ban list, and I'm kind of surprised to see it here now. Maybe the cards that got hit did affect it, and now the landscape allows it to exist once again. Alongside things like Mirage Galgamon. Now look, I know it's surprising that this card is not hit or restricted in some fashion, but with the Mirage Loop stuff going around, I'm pretty sure its days are numbered. And then surprisingly enough, Shine Greymon. This is like the deck you cannot keep down. Like if you're looking for a really good investment deck, I feel like Shine Greymon is one that does go the distance. Like, you're bang for buck here. This deck has been good since like BT12 at this point, and it feels like it's only getting more support, Jesus. And then looking down at the rookie level, if you were one of the brave few people who publicly supported decks like Numamon or Yellow Vaccine, you should be happy to see some results here for both of those decks. I mean, the ban list hit them, but it did not obliterate them, so it seems like there's still some stuff you can do here to make those decks work. And finally, the other decks here definitely make it feel like we're in a bit of a Wild West scenario where we've got things like Virus Imperial Dramon, Beelzemon, and even things like the mill decks just running around right now. Actually, I'm kind of sad. We're not going to have like this environment for a very long time. When you think about BT19 coming out at the end of this month, in Asia anyway, it's kind of sad that we're not going to really get to explore all this has to offer. The first deck that we're going to take a close look at this week is going to be the Purple Hybrid that I mentioned before, that focuses on offensive power and milling cards. It really feels like with a build like this that the Purple Hybrid sandwich has really found the bread for its, champion level meat. I just want folks to know. I want people to know, you included, Seiji, that I workshopped that line, and that was probably the best version I could come up with, and probably the safest version as well. But I left it in on principle alone. The YouTube algorithm be damned. Alright, let me get back on track here. By using the level 6 Mervamon and Ignitemon, you can create for some super powerful burst turns where you can play something down like 2 Belgramons or a Belgramon and a Kaiser Leomon in order to mill a ton of cards or make attacks immediately. And while the Belgramon itself cannot attack, because it has retaliation and inheritance, all you have to do is evolve over it into a Duskmon in order to actually make the attack. Looking at some of the interesting options for the deck, I love the inclusion of the 3 BT7 Schwarz Lasot's card. I've always felt like this was a really good removal option, and seeing it in this list makes me feel vindicated. Outside of this though, the deck's game plan is pretty much the same. You want to get down your Tamers and the Koji Tamers and the Matte Tamer you see down on the bottom there in order to go into your level 4 hybrid cards. Those cards can evolve either on attack, or you can evolve them for cheap costs for more card draw if you need them. They have things like Retaliation, they cycle cards from your hand and your deck, and they can also buff themselves up into things like the Velgramon and the Duskmon, depending on how many colors your opponent's side of the board. And you can actually change the opponent's Digimon's colors using the Duskmon's effect. Personally, I'm a fan of decks that you can build in a lot of different ways, and in this category, Purple Hybrid has so much potential. So if it's something that you like as well, definitely give this deck a try. Most players saw the Promo Rui and Ukomon cards get restricted to 1 per deck and thought, okay, well, now I've got to pivot with Ancient Garurumon, I'm just going to use the blue hybrid cards like Stravimon. But the real Chads out there know the power of the Sun Moon engine and went with Lunamon instead. Lunamon in the Ancient Garurumon deck here is such a really cool tech because it lets you reuse cards like the Ukomon that you only have 1 of in the promo version, or the other cards in the deck like the Searcher or the regular BT16 Ukomon as well. And in some cases, you can even bounce the Lunamon itself to give yourself +2 memory. This way, you can guarantee that you get off your attack when you evolve your Koji Tamer into a Kindle Garurumon, who then warps into Ancient Garurumon to get 2 security checks. And in cases where you don't bounce the Lunamon, you also have the 2 copies of the promo Lobomon that are glared into oblivion at the top of the picture here to use to evolve and then warp into the Ancient Greymon as well. The pre-restricted list version of Ancient Garurumon, there was a red package that used cards like Muchomon in order to get the effects of cards like Crimson Blaze as well as Atomic Blaster off. This deck can virtually do the same thing. Because the Lunamon can't evolve off of red or blue, the Muchomon here still works as well as a source for those option cards to actually play them off, as well as the red and yellow Koji and Takia Tamer. And in the bottom of this list here, you see just this rondo of restricted cards, things like the Promo Rui I mentioned before, Hammer Spark behind it, Ice Wall, and then Jet Sylphimon as well for a little bit of recovery. And so, while the deck was already super aggressive, now when you have things like the Lunamon to give you memory to guarantee that you're going to get 2 security hits with your Ancient Garurumon, as well as things like the Atomic Inferno to back it up, I mean, this deck is even more offensive. Each week, I allow my champion level and higher YouTube members to vote on decks they like to see featured in these meta report videos, and this week, nearly a third of them voted to see Imperial Dramon Virus. If you'd like to vote on decks that you want to see featured in these meta reports, alongside some other cool perks and bonuses, consider becoming a champion level YouTube member as well. Again, I want to give a huge shout out to all the folks who do support the channel. I truly appreciate it, and with that, let's take a look at Imperial Dramon Virus. Taking a look at the deck here, unfortunately the second column has a glare so bad you can probably see this thing from space, so we just went ahead and recreated it in DigimonCard.dev so we can actually read it. This list feels like a nice mix of the EX3 core cards alongside or sprinkled in with some of the BT16 stuff for some cool effects. Take for example the BT16 Wormmon, who lets you evolve whenever he's played or started your main phase, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And interestingly enough, this deck runs a couple copies of the BT16 Stingmon, who my guess here is that he's more of a removal card where you can rest something with his effect and then you can just immediately punch into it with the retaliation and just wipe it off the board. What gives me pause though is that their inheritance effects aren't super great. The ability to just rest a Digimon whenever you attack doesn't seem super useful, considering the Imperial Dramon Dragon mode basically blows everything up except 1 Digimon, and the Dinobimon from EX3 just lets you attack unsuspended Digimon anyway. As good as these cards might be, it feels like their inheritance effects are a little lackluster. Speaking of Dinobimon, the BT16 Dinobimon is a fantastic choice for this deck as a way to save your level 4 materials to re-DNA Digivolve into another level 5, while also generating more offense by letting you play a Digimon and that Digimon can immediately attack. The 1 of the Fighter Mode Ace is also such a nice little defensive tech, but also works really well offensively. If you've got the EX3 Pilodramon up underneath him in sources, you can essentially hit for 4 security. Keep in mind the Dragon mode lets you evolve on attack, and because the Fighter mode lets you become unsuspended, you can make that a second attack for the nice 1-2 punch. And finally, you'll notice that there's no Digi-Eggs shown on this list anyway, and that's because the original also didn't have any. So I'm kind of wondering what it might be. My guess says that it's like the BT6, I think, Tsunomon, who just lets you cycle more cards. Whenever you discard something, you can just draw 1 extra. But I'm not sure. What do you folks think? Let me know in the comments below. And so a deck that has so many ways to bring your Digimon back, and things like the Pilodramon and the Dinobimon, the Partition Dinobimon to save your level 4s, the Purple Scramble, and the Imperial Dramon Fighter mode, it's really hard to keep this deck down. And so with the restricted list in place and in effect and this first week's events, it kind of feels like we're in the Wild West all over again. You know, it feels like that first week of a box set where kind of anything's up for grabs, and honestly, I like that. You gotta embrace the chaos sometimes. What's really going to be exciting though is that next week where we get the store qualifiers happening, I think that's where the bullets are really going to fly. And now with the restricted lists not only in effect in Asia but also all around the world, what decks are you tamers playing out there? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways folks, I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.